In 1620, while the Mayflower was in Provincetown, 18 of its men sailed in a small shallop, searching for a place to live. They came to present-day Eastham, where they were met by a group of Nawsett. After a brief but violent encounter, the English left towards today's Plymouth. In 2020, we remember this first encounter. We explore its meanings for today and tomorrow.
Nauset, as it was spoken in the Indian language and by the early settlers, was accented strongly on the first syllable, the last fading away until it was almost inaudible. So true was this that Captain Dermer, who was on the coast in 1619, wrote the word as Nawsell, in spite of the fact that no Cape Cod Indian can make the sound of the English L. There's plenty of good evidence, however, that the pronunciation in Indian days was much the same as it is now, Nawset. We get a vivid eyewitness description of the Nauset Indians as early as 1605, a chart of Nauset Harbor, and a sketch of the populous Indian villages which surrounded it. At this date, there was not a white settlement on the whole North American seaboard from the St. Croix River in Maine to the Spanish towns in Florida. Champlain, who accompanied Sieur de Monts on his exploring expedition down the New England coast this year, lay weather-bound in Nauset Harbor for a whole week in July and had an excellent opportunity to observe the Indians and map the country. He called the harbor Malbert and shows the inlet at that date as lying about midway between the headlands of the present towns of Eastham and Orleans. When the Pilgrims landed on Cape Cod in 1620, Aspinet was Sachem of the Nauset Indians. It is also entirely possible that he may have been their chief 15 years earlier when the French visited Nauset. If so, he would have been the father of the handsome young Indian maiden whom Champlain admired so much. He was undoubtedly the most powerful chieftain on the Lower Cape at the time of the settlement of Plymouth, having 100 warriors in his band, more than the great Massasoit himself could muster. Aspinet was named as one of the conspirators in the plot to annihilate the English settlements of Wessagusset and Plymouth in 1623, and shortly after the killing of the two ringleaders by Captain Miles Standish and his men, is said to have hidden himself away in the swamps and died from exposure. In my notes below on his life, I have given my ideas as to his death at this time, but whether or not his death occurred as recorded, it is certain that the Nauset as a tribe never again regained any position of importance among the Lower Cape tribes. 1622, November or later. Governor Bradford, while on the corn-trading voyage on which Squanto died at Monomoyik, came back around the Cape and called at a place called Nauset, where the Sachem used the governor very kindly, and where they bought 8 or 10 hogsheads of corn and beans. While there a storm arose, and their shallop struck adrift from the ship, the Swan, which lay about 2 miles offshore on account of the flats. Being unable to find the shallop, Bradford was obliged to stack the corn, cover it with mats and sedge, and arranged with the Indians to look after it and keep the rats from eating it. This the Sachem promised to make good, and at the governor's request the Sachem sent men to seek the shallop, which was found buried in the sand and unserviceable for the present. The governor gave the Sachem special charge that it should not be further broken, promising ere long to fetch it and the corn. In January, Captain Standish took another shallop and went for the corn, which they found in safety as they had left it. Also, they mended the other shallop and got all their corn aboard the ship. Whilst they were at Nauset, having occasion to lie on the shore, an Indian stole a few beads, scissors, and other trading good from their boat. Standish took some of his men and went to the Sachem, telling him what had happened and demanding the goods or else the man who had stolen them. The next day the Sachem came to the rendezvous, accompanied with many men, in a stately manner, who, saluting the captain in the wise, he thrust out his tongue, that one might see the roots thereof, and therewith licked his hand from the wrist to the fingers, and, at the same time, bowing the knee in the English manner, as Squanto had instructed. After salutation he delivered the beads and other things to the captain, saying he had much beaten the party who stole them, and that he had caused his women to bake bread and bring the white men, seeming to be very sorry for the fact. 1623, March and later. When the conspiracy to wipe out the English was revealed to Edward Winslow by Massasoit, he named the Nausetts as being in the plot with the Massachusetts Bay Indians. After Court Day, the 23rd of March, Captain Standish and his army of 8 men went out on an expedition to Wessagusset, near Wallachusett's Ray Sachem's head men, and killed them both in a pitched battle. The plot against the colonists was thus nipped in the bud, and concerning those other people that intended to join with the Massachusetts against us, though we never went against any of them, yet the sudden and unexpected execution, together with the just judgment of God upon their guilty consciences, hath so terrified and amazed them, as in like manner they forsook their houses, running to and fro like men distracted, living in swamps and other desert places, and so brought manifold diseases among themselves. Very many are dead, as Canicum the Sachem of Manomet, Aspinet the Sachem of Nauset, Iano Sachem of Matachiast. Edward Winslow, who wrote the above, sailed for England the 10th of September, 1623, so Aspinet's death, if it occurred as he describes it, must have taken place between April and September of that year. It has always been rather difficult for me to believe that these 3 powerful sachems went off by themselves and died in this manner. In the first place, it does not seem reasonable that their families and tribesmen would have let them do it. Secondly, I cannot conceive of a Cape Cod Indian of this period, born and bred to hunting and fishing, and inured to all kinds of physical hardship, coming to his death thus quickly just because he had to go into hiding for a time. The season was late spring and summer, the woods full of game, and the streams and inlets of fish. The whole North American wilderness was before him. The only white men on the whole coast for hundreds of miles was the handful at Plymouth, and although they had shown themselves to be a hard-hitting bunch, still it was a physical impossibility for them to raid every Indian village on the Cape to see who was there and who not. Surely this was not a very fearful outlook for an able-bodied Indian, and it would seem more logical to me to think that Aspinet simply dropped out of the white men's sight for a time, and let his tribesmen pass the word along that he was dead. I am very confident that this was just what Iano of Matachiset did, as will be seen in my notes in Group 3, the Saquatuckets. However, Winslow's word is all we have to go by in this case, and it is certain if Aspinet ever showed up again, it was under another name and unknown to the English. Aspinet was a comparatively powerful sachem when the Pilgrims landed, having 100 warriors at his back, and a prosperous tribe who could spare 8 or 10 hogsheads of corn and beans, with the winter coming on. After the abortive plot to wipe out the whites, the tribe never again rose to prominence, and in a few short years had ceased to exist as a tribal entity. There is nothing to show, that I have ever seen, that Aspinet left any children. Sachem George and his father Achamehed, who succeeded to the Nauset Sachemery, are nowhere named as being his descendants, but, as I have already stated, in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, it is probable that Achamehed was Aspinet's brother.
My name is Joanna Hollick. Thank you for watching today's episode of the Sunset series. If you're interested in participating more actively in learning about local history, there are several sites and landmarks here in Eastham that you can visit. One such landmark is Indian Rock. Indian Rock is a 20-ton glacial boulder that was used by Native Americans for tool sharpening. The stone was likely used for sharpening bone items such as harpoon heads, fish hooks, and stone axes. Today, you can still see the markings these tools made in the stone. Also known as Sharpening Rock, this boulder was moved to the top of Skiff Hill near Hemingway Landing in 1965 due to shoreline retreat. You can still find the rock there today. From the parking lot at the end of Hemingway Road, it is a 1/10 of a mile walk uphill to the rock. And we encourage you to visit this historic landmark. Thank you.